Welcome back to another episode of CRE, The Unspoken Truth. Today we're going to talk about cycles, market cycles, and really they are always happening. And whether we are on the up or on the down, there's always a cycle. I think it's something you get in this industry knowing that it's just going to be part of your career, right? And so I want to start by just asking you, what cycles have you worked through in your career?
Well, I started my career in 1983. We had the great FDIC savings and loan debacle in '87. We started Lee & Associates in 1991, the Arizona office, which is right when the RTC days were in full force. So that was a big commercial real estate cycle. Then obviously we had the tech bubble burst, and then in 2008 we had the massive Great Recession that you didn't experience because you were too young, and a lot of millennials didn't experience that. So they have only experienced, and this is one of the reasons why we're talking about this today, is because all of the millennials have only experienced the up from the 2008 Great Recession, and it's simply not sustainable, number one, and two, it doesn't happen. There will always be a cycle, and everybody says that, but this time it's different. This time, it could go on longer, and so we have to be just cognizant of it. And so we wanted to talk today about that, just making sure that people recognize it. Even though you say it, do you believe it, and how do your actions manifest themselves?
Would you not classify 2020 and the last 2 years? I mean, I think it's just been a really weird market. How would you classify that in terms of a cycle?
Well, it depends on where you are and what commercial part of the real estate you are, but it was the fastest recession in history, right? With the economy got shut down because of the pandemic, and they came back and they included a bunch of jobs, and it was the fastest recovery ever. It's not really, when you look back on the hindsight, it's not the cycle we're talking about. That was just a blip. We've talked about black swans on this. It was more of a black swan than it was a cycle. Mm-hmm. The real reality is a cycle is long-term. People like, how do you define the cycle? And I define the cycle is the wind at my back or is the wind at my face? Am I spacing it? And so what I do as a broker on a daily basis is represent office tenants and landlords. The wind is at our face in that right now, because there is major change going on in how people use office space. Mm-hmm. The wind is galing 100 miles an hour at the back of our industrial brokers and our multifamily brokers and residential brokers. There's still a tremendous, when you're building new homes in our business. And so that the wind is completely at their back. So we have this time, which is the pandemic's created wind blowing in all directions. And so you have to really, really focus. And I spend a lot of time these days talking to clients and really getting them into the micro. We got to talk about macro today, but you really, really got to get into the micro segment of what you're looking at to understand what the market's doing today.
Yeah, there's a number of questions on what you just talked about that I want to ask, but the first one I want to ask is to get you your crystal ball out and say, where are we in the cycle, and what do you predict in the next year, 3 years, 5 years?
Again, to my last point, let's talk about each segment of the cycle. Yeah. Let's talk about the most hard-hit cycles so far, which would have been office, retail, and hospitality. I saw an article this morning that hospitality should be back. They're projecting 2023 hospitality occupancy rates are going to be back to where they were pre-pandemic in 2023. Retail is coming back slowly, and we're going to see how robust that is after all of the free PPP money gets spent in the next 3 or 4 months. And office is, as we've talked, and I'm on my C2 Voice blog, we spent a bunch of time on that. Office is really in a transition. The transition from have to be in the office to flex hours to remote, and how is that going to look long term? So I would say those three, the wind is still You know, if it's not blowing in our face, it's certainly breezing in our face. And the industrial, on the other side, the industrial and multifamily, while there is a hiccup going on right now and they're all panicked because interest rates have gone up, the reality is the market is still on fire for them. It's been a massive run for apartments, 14 years. The demographics look incredibly good for multifamily over the next few years. Industrial, they're still building a ton of buildings and they're still leasing the heck out of them. So the wind is at their back. However, they can see now that we're going to be at the peak or at the summit of the cycle here shortly in the next couple of years.
Yep. Yep. And is the multifamily, obviously all real estate is dependent on you know, cities and neighborhoods, and it gets really granular there, right? And I know multifamily's blowing up and has blown up here in Phoenix. Is that true across the country? Let's say you know, a San Francisco or a New York or somewhere that did experience a lot of people leaving during the pandemic over the last couple of years, going to a Phoenix or a Florida or Texas. So it makes sense to me that Phoenix multifamily would be blowing up, but how about in those cities that aren't necessarily experiencing big growth?
Well, you know, it's really always interesting because one of the biggest factors, if you're going to pick a commercial real estate as your career, and I've been super fortunate to be that, pick an area that's going to grow over the next 20 years. I think I'm really good. And I think I mentioned this before. I think I'm really good broker and I've been very successful for 37 years, but I've been in Arizona. When I got into the marketplace, there was 20 million square feet of office space. We have 100 million today. And so I've been blessed to be in a market that continues to grow. And so, you know, if you go to Indianapolis or to San Francisco, of course, the pace of growth is not what you're seeing in the Smile or Sun Belt. It's not that pace. However, the demographics of multifamily are such that in even California, that's a growth market, and they're not building enough homes. It's super hard to get permitting for homes. And so the demographics for multifamily look good. And in the Midwest, you could be growing at 1%, but they're not building the homes. And so if you can't buy a home, then you have to rent. And so I can't, you know, I'm not a national prognosticator for across the board, but in general, I would say that multifamily industrial are still doing pretty good. And this is the first time the cycles haven't been congruent. I've always said that, you know, industrial may be a little ahead of the market, office may be a little behind, but they're generally in the same place. This is the first time in 37 years where that is not the case. We're on opposite sides of the cycle. And let me give you kind of the cycle. There's 4 stages in a cycle. The first stage is obviously the kind of hyper growth, overdevelopment, which causes the cycle. So users start slowing down. You're still building. It takes 1 to 3 years to build a project. So these projects get started and people stop moving if you're building multifamily, or they stop taking office space. And so you overbuild. So you have excess space. Your absorption slows down. So then obviously the vacancy rates rise. So that's just hyper growth or hyper overbuilding, and it causes the recession. And then the recession at the bottom, you have to stop building. The markets have to correct themselves, and it takes time to fill up those space. And then you have the growth phase where everybody's kind of going back on that we've been missing. And this is where the growth phase, like right now, residential underbuilt for a decade. So they're having to build fast, and it's been 10 years since they met the market demand. And so there's a pent up demand for that. And then you hit the top of the market and you start the cycle over again.
Right. So every cycle is different, right? And I think you've talked a lot about wind blowing in your face, wind at your back, in different segments. But I'm wondering does it get harder? Obviously, there are fewer deals when the market's down or winds again, you know, at your face. Does it get challenging because maybe you're competing for fewer deals, right? And I'm gonna add an example. So as you know, my fiance Amanda has been a teacher, and during, COVID and after, got a real estate license. Last year, worked part-time in real estate. Last year, the residential market here in Phoenix was on fire. A home would be listed on Thursday. They'd have an open house over the weekend, and it would be off the market by Monday. And it was super competitive, 20, 30 offers per house. And it's shifted really quickly. So now she's full-time in real estate, and the buyers have a lot more power. Houses are staying on the market a lot longer. And so it's just a completely different market. And my question is it harder or is it just different? And like,
Well, here's the crazy thing. It's harder because she got into a market, literally she put her toe into the market when it was the most incredible hot-paced marketplace ever. I met with a guy who was developing multifamily, and he's like, I don't understand. The deal that I'm doing is falling apart. And I'm like, well, welcome to a cycle, and so she tipped her toe. And then I know the Arizona stats. So it's like, it went from 2 weeks of supply to 2 months of supply. The average is 6 months.
right.
So it's still 3x better than the historical average. She just got it at the wrong time. And I used to say this, it was the funniest thing. I got into brokerage in 1983, 84, and I was just figuring out the business in the RTC days. And I remember the brokers who had been, were senior at the time going, man, I just hate this market. It sucks. And I was like, well, I just made more money than I ever made in my life. And I think I made $50,000. And this is the greatest market I've ever been in. And so it's perspective. Now that I'm old and I see these recessions, 2008 was a son of a bitch for all of us. I owned a bunch of real estate that got hammered. Our business dropped off dramatically in 2009 and 10. Net absorption in Phoenix, Arizona for office went negative for the first time in ever. We had, it was like death, taxes, and 1 million square feet of net absorption in office space in Phoenix every year. And then 1989 hits and we're negative. It's like, well, where did this come from? And so I thought, I'd been 25 years in the business, and I thought, it never goes negative. And the answer is it does go negative. It does going to change. People will overbuild. The markets will slow. So for, Amanda and for anybody else that's in the business, it's going to come. Plan for that and look for that. And so how do you execute that? I mean, I think part of this is the unspoken truth is, look, reading the tea leaves, putting your head in the sand is not an answer. Doing what you did last year is not going to get you to where you want to be. And so we talked on another once about dinosaurs and, people that are trying to adopt our software, and some people are open to adopting, and we're running into brokers that are not. They're putting their head in the sand and going, I'm going to be able to do deals the same way that I did 5 years ago or 20 years ago, and I'm still going to be a successful broker. And what they're slowly going to do is put themselves out of business, while these young brokers come in who, like when I was young, make $50,000 or now 75 or 100 and think they're hit the jackpot. They're going to retire, and they're going to be technology savvy, and they're going to do deals way more effective, and they're going to show their clients how they're doing the deals with an open inbox. All of that leads to, you've got to be able to change and grow, and you have to look at the tea leaves. And so you have to spend time on this and understand what you think the market's doing.
Yeah. It's like we talk about in our own business, or, with my own career, is like, you've got to work your butt off, at night, on weekends, in your own time to become an expert as fast as possible, because that's what clients are looking for. And they're looking for you to be the one to tell them. And one of my questions I wrote down was, what are you telling yourself as a market picks up and you start growing and there's more deals, and when it starts to slow down, like we've seen maybe in the last couple of years?
Well, there's a lot of mind games you play.
Yeah.
Let me put a plug in for my first book, How to Win in Commercial Real Estate Investing. In it, I explained, like each week a different segment to learn. And one of my biggest key things is one of the weeks or a couple of the weeks, learn the marketplace. Learn historical, learn where you are in the market, learn what's going on, look at what's happening with interest rates. Spend time to do that, to become an expert in all these areas across the board. And I highly recommend the book, not because most of the time you see on TV, hey, you don't need any capital. I'm going to show you how to, buy real estate with somebody else's money anywhere in the US, and I can do it in 2 days. That's not how I learn the business. That's not how most people who make money in real estate do learn the business. They take time, they learn it. And so how do you make money? You know, we just had a meeting with our team that said, look, where are we on this cycle? There is massive change going on. I think I've used this analogy before. One of the top 25 law firms in the country, I just represented here in Phoenix, and they went from 33,000 square feet to 19,000 square feet because of the pandemic. And we have a tech company that's in 40,000 square feet right now, and probably are going to lease 7,500 square feet because everybody's gone remote. There's a massive change going on, and it means that, you know, where I would have been able to make a 30,000 foot deal and a 40,000 foot deal, just two deals totaling 70,000 square feet, it's now going to be a total of 30,000 square feet. So 40% commission on these two deals. So the key now for us is we have to do more deals. We have to pick up the pace. We have to do smaller deals. We have to spread ourselves a little bit and do maybe cats and dog deals. And that's just how we have to do if we're going to meet our goals, which we do have goals. And so you can't be dogmatic. Oh, I only do this. You know, that doesn't work in our business.
So what I'm hearing is what you're telling yourself and your team is we have to be changing, because if you don't, the market will crush you, right? If you expect the same thing, the market's always changing, right? People's expectations and consumption trends always changing. And if you don't adopt and change with them, you're going to get crushed.
I don't know if you saw that video that was filmed in the Himalayas, and there was this avalanche, and it started out, and this guy is videoing it, and it starts out on the other side of the valley. And you see this kind of cool avalanche starting down, and it gets bigger, and it gets to the bottom, and you think, man, that was really cool. And then it keeps going, and he starts coming up the side of the mountain he's on. And finally, at the last second, and this is literally a month ago, he ducks behind this rock in the video, and there's just massive amounts of snow and rocks flying by his head. And that's what the market is. The market is an avalanche that one broker, one company, one team has no control over. It will be this avalanche that rolls right over you. And you're like, well, I thought I was a pretty hotshot broker, and it just buried me. And that's what happens. It happens in the marketplace, and people get blindsided, and I'm shocked. I have a couple stories that I tell on this. When I went to college, my college roommate at Nicholls State University was from Steubenville, Ohio. And when I graduated, I was doing brokerage, and I was doing a deal for HDR in Pittsburgh, PA. So I flew back there to tour the market with our local broker, and Steubenville's outside there. So I went into the market. When I was in Pittsburgh, there was this video, and they had announced it. So in the early 60s and 70s, the world's steel was made in the Midwest. The Pittsburgh Steelers, all the Pittsburgh, where all the steel melts, and that was the world. And then China, in the last 30 years, has taken over all the steel. And when I was in Pittsburgh, there was an interview with a guy in Steubenville, Ohio. They were shutting down the last steel mill in Steubenville, which had built it, and the town had died. And they interviewed him, and he said, I wish somebody would have told me that this plant was going to close down. And I can't believe it. You know, they were interviewing this guy, and I thought, man, where have you been? This was coming for 20 years. This avalanche was right in your face. Right. So the world tells you it's coming, and there is going to be a cycle. If you've had 10-year run in multifamily, they're going to overbuild multifamily. May be another 5 years, but it's going to happen. So you have to be prepared for that. So the other story I tell, you want me to tell you? It's a story about my dad. As you know, my dad was a baseball coach, and he got inducted into the Arizona Baseball Coaches Hall of Fame. And the night of his induction, I was with him, and I said, Dad, congratulations on getting inducted to the Hall of Fame. You were a great coach. And he looked at me dead in the eye, and he said, Craig, I was a great coach. Then my pitcher graduated. And it's so true. He was so good until Brian Piper and Craig Harris graduated, and then he was like below 500 the next year. So the market you're not the market. I think I'm really good. I am not the market.
Right. Yeah, that's good. I like those stories. I've heard them before. But they're good. So you talked about what you tell yourself and what you tell your team with markets, always be changing, always be analyzing the business, your own trends, the market trends, and trying to stay ahead of things. What do you tell your clients when, you know, a recession could be approaching, or, you know, what do you tell them, you know, regarding the market and the various cycles?
So let's talk, because we're on both sides. We do landlord and tenant rep. On the landlord side, right, we're telling our clients right now, lease your space.
Yeah.
It's a sea change of what's going on. We need to get our space leased. If you're sitting there at 20% vacant or 25%, get that space leased whatever you can.
Drop rates to get it leased.
Well, we're telling that. It's interesting. Other brokers are saying, no, hold off. I think the market's going to come back. We're telling our clients, hey, if there's a sea change going on, let's get our properties leased if the market's declining. And on the tenant side, you know, we're saying, hey, you can renew for another year. Let's see what's happening in the marketplace. We think the market's going to go down a little bit. I have a number of clients. I was just talking to an attorney yesterday, wants to buy a building. I'm like, I've been telling them for 4 years, not the time to buy, not the time to buy. And I called him earlier and I said, I think 2023 is the time that we're going to be able to get you a building that you can buy. And so he was pretty excited about that, because for 4 years I've been kind of poo-pooing it. And it just, the challenge that we have in today's society is that everybody wants the answer today. They want it black and white, and they want to be able to execute on it tomorrow. And the markets don't work like that. Real estate is not the stock market. It doesn't trade on a daily basis. There are big waves of cycles that happen. And so when we say a cycle, everybody thinks about the top and the bottom. It just moves. It's just moving. And that's what we have to understand, is that it's not stagnant. It's always moving, getting better, getting worse. And it takes time for this to happen. I personally want to acquire more real estate. I'm looking at buying a big property right now, but I've had to price it. I had to discount the price substantially because I want to build in the risk of the market declining. And so I just got off the phone call with Corey Peterson, who does my analysis, and she said, yeah, this is a below market deal today, but in a year it could be market. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay. I just don't want to buy today's market and then lose money year one.
Right. So if you're looking at buying a property and you think maybe over the next year prices will drop, but interest rates may continue to rise, how do you kind of, you know, reconcile that in your own mind, or with a client who could, you know, you're advising? And I know the same thing is happening in all asset classes, including residential, right? A lot of buyers are feeling the same way. You know?
Yeah, it's a financial analysis. You know, interest rates could rise another 2 points. What does that affect you? So even if the market, you know, the market is way more important than interest rates at these kind of interest. Everybody's freaked out that interest rates are at 5%. Well, you know, I remember
historic lows.
I remember 17%, you know, and it's not like I think it'll get to that point. Deals should be able to be done. You know, historically, interest rates at 5 were great interest rates. These are interest rates everybody was jonesing to get. So you should be able to accommodate the deal, and it just takes the market time to figure it out. You know, we are not big buyers when the wind's in our face, which means the market. I hate. I'm actually buying this or trying to buy this, and I'm a little, you know, I'm yes or no. I'm black and white on it, because I only want to buy it if I get the terms that I want, because I normally would just wait to see what happens on the marketplace. But I'm bullish on this property long term. I'm bullish on the tenants, and so I think we're going to try and buy it. But typically, no.
Well, that's any negotiation. I think about the quote. It's something like he who cares less wins.
Right.
So if you say, hey, I want my terms or I'm out, and you're totally fine walking out, then it usually will work out, you know, one way or the other for you.
Well, as a buyer, I put different hats on, right? As a buyer, I put that hat on, what you're saying right now. As a seller, I would be putting on the different hat, saying, hey, I'm willing to be a little bit more flexible. And this seller is that, because you know, the pricing's dropped. Be a little more flexible because I need to sell it. And so it depends. As a broker, I put on both hats because my job, I only get paid when the deal gets done. So how do we find the ground that works for everybody? And a lot of times in a real choppy market, the deals are nobody's happy. Normally, like if the market's going up, the tenant's never happy because the rent's way higher than he wanted, and the landlord's not happy because you haven't pushed rents high enough. In the markdown market, the landlord's happy because like, oh, I had to discount my rents, but the tenant's like, well, the market's going to crater even more. Too bad I couldn't wait. And so we're always in the middle of that where we're negotiating. As a broker, you're negotiating. And one of the things that happens in technology allows you to kind of see more visibility into the transaction itself, where the nuances might lie, as opposed to just relying on your consultant. You might be able to bring parties together more because you're sharing information.
Yeah, this has been a wonderful conversation. Some of my takeaways are markets are always moving, right? Every day, every month, every year, they're moving and changing. And it's imperative that you stay in touch with it and constantly watching the market and how people are reacting to it and how you're reacting to it, or how your team can stay ahead of trends. And I think that's one of my biggest takeaways from this. Go ahead.
Let me give you one more point.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks the market goes like this and then hits and goes back down and then comes back up. That's not really how the market goes. It could go like this and then it could go like this for 4 years.
Yeah.
If you were in Japan the last 20 years, you would have seen zero appreciation for 20 years.
Yeah.
So when you say cycle, it's not a roller coaster. Sometimes it's flat.
Right.
And sometimes at the bottom, it sits down there and it's flat for years.
Right.
In the RTC days, everybody remembers all the money everybody made, but there was 4 years where nobody was making any money. Everybody, the S&Ls were getting foreclosed on. 4 years of that. And there's this cycle, multifamily, it's been 4 years at the top of the market, or 5, where they keep getting up and higher and higher and higher. And it's like, this is fairly flat. And so just don't think of the market as just, here's the peak and here's the trough. It's a big wave. If you look at waves in the ocean, they're not all the same. They don't come up, crest, and go down. Some never crest, some do.
Yeah. Well, I think we've seen that recently too, with 2008 obviously being a huge downfall and decline, and then a relatively steady uphill climb over the last decade, but then a sharp decline and a sharp increase. And now it's kind of, up and down, if you will, and kind of waiting to see over the next year or two. But
choppy.
It's choppy, but compared to the last 2 decades where it was really low and really high, it was.
Well, and I would, the other point that I want to make on this, and this is not pounding our chest as brokers, but when the market is choppy, getting expertise is critical. There have been people who have been in our business an hour and have looked like they're really smart, and they've never been in a recession. They don't know what's hitting them. They don't know how to react in it. They think they do. And until you've been through it, you don't really know how long it is. So I would encourage anybody who's listening on this to really double down on their experienced advisors, not just brokers, but other people who have been through cycles, and really listen to them. That there's value today in experience.
Yeah, well, they bring less, I would assume, right? Less emotion, and an outside perspective and a longer term perspective that people who are new to the market, or someone who's a consumer who's looking to a broker for advice, lacks, right? Someone
you hope that they do. You hope that they've been through cycles and they've figured it out. And you hope that they're growing. So you want to make sure that they are growing and they're actually spending time on what they, becoming a professional. So
yeah. Well, this has been great. Cycles are always moving. They always happen. There will always be another one, and that's inevitable. So we always have to be changing and growing with it. Thanks so much for your time, and we'll be back with another one. Thanks.
Very good. Thanks.